bronze flashed beneath the walls of Troy. Dust climbed around a warrior no enemy wanted to meet. His name was Achilles. He was the brightest blade in the Greek war against Troy. Kings trusted him. Friends loved him. Prophecy watched him. And somewhere inside all that glory, one weakness waited. Not in his courage, not in his skill. In the single part of him his mother could not save. To understand Achilles, we have to go back before Troy, before war, and before glory asked a boy for everything. Achilles was born to Peleus, a mortal king of Thetia, and Thetis, a sea nymph, a divine daughter of the sea. From the beginning, his life stood between two worlds, half palace, half tide, half human hope, half godly fear. Thetis loved her son fiercely, and every version of his childhood begins with that desperate love. In the oldest Greek poems, Achilles is mortal, glorious, and vulnerable, just like every other man in battle. Later storytellers added a darker image, saying Thetis dipped him in the Styx, the underworld river, while holding one heel. Other stories say she passed him through sacred fire, burning away what was human, until Peleus stopped her in terror. Either way, the lesson is the same. A mother fought fate, and fate left one tiny door open. But Achilles was still only a child, and children do not yet know the price of their own names. Peleus sent the boy to Chiron, the wise centaur, a being half man and half horse. On Mount Pelion, under pine shadows and cold wind, Chiron trained heroes to be more than merely strong. There Achilles learned music, hunting, healing, patience, and war, all the skills a Greek hero was expected to carry. He learned to throw a spear cleanly, to read the land, and to master his anger before it mastered him. That last lesson mattered most, because Achilles was born with a blazing, dangerous heat inside him. And still, another choice was already rising toward him from the future, like thunder beyond a distant ridge. A prophecy said Achilles could live a long, quiet life at home, unknown and safe. Or he could sail to Troy, win immortal fame, and die young beneath its shadowed walls. That was the bargain at his center, length or glory, peace or a name that outlived kingdoms. Tereus knew which road he would choose, and that knowledge filled her with a mother's dread. When the Greek kings gathered to recover Helen, queen of Sparta, from Troy, Thetis tried to hide her son. She sent him to Cyrrhus, an island court where later tales say he was dressed among the king's daughters. But Troy would not fall without Achilles, or so the seer Calchas warned the waiting Greeks. So Odysseus, the sharp-minded king of Ithaca, came searching with a merchant's disguise and a hunter's eye. He laid out jewels and weapons together, then sounded an alarm as if enemies had arrived. The girls scattered in fear, but one figure reached instinctively for the spear and shield. That was Achilles, and even in hiding, war recognized him before the watching world truly did. Achilles left behind his father, his mother, and the shorelines that still offered him another life. He sailed with the Myrmidons, the fierce warriors of Phthia, black ships cutting across the Aegean toward history. Beside him stood Patroclus, his closest companion, the friend who knew the gentler places beneath all that fire. He was swift, relentless, dazzling in battle, a hero whose presence changed the courage of every man around him. In the long years before the Iliad begins, he helped sack cities around Troy and brought plunder back to camp. Among those war prizes was Briseis, a captive woman whose loss would ignite the story that made Achilles legendary. Because the great disaster of Achilles was not weakness of body at first, it was wounded honor. A plague struck the Greek camp when Agamemnon, high king of the Greek forces, insulted a priest of Apollo. To calm the god, Agamemnon returned his captive Chryseis, but demanded Briseis from Achilles as compensation. It was a brutal humiliation. In the warrior code of the age, public honor meant everything. Instead, he mastered the impulse and chose colder destruction, refusing battle and shaking the war harder than any spear. Achilles sat by the ships while the battle raged, and the Greeks began to break beneath Trojan pressure. Thetis heard her son weeping with rage and crossed from the sea to comfort him. At his request, she went to Zeus, king of the gods, and begged him to let the Greeks suffer. Zeus agreed, and suddenly Achilles' absence became the most dangerous weapon in the entire Greek camp. Day after day, the Trojans surged forward under Hector, Troy's greatest prince, its shield, husband, and defender. They drove the Greeks backward, toward the surf and the wooden hulls that meant escape or ruin. Patroclus could not bear to watch the ships burn and his friends collapse beneath Trojan attack. He begged to wear Achilles' armor, so the Trojans would think the great warrior himself had returned. Achilles agreed but warned him clearly, "Drive them back from the ships, then come home." The Trojans fell back. Hope leapt through the Greek camp like fire catching dry grass. But victory has its own hunger, and Patroclus pressed too far, beyond warning, beyond safety, beyond return. Apollo struck him with confusion, stripped away his strength, and left him exposed before the walls of Troy. Then Hector met him there and finished the fight, not with cruelty, but with the finality of war. When the news reached Achilles, the whole world inside him cracked open with a soundless violence. He fell into the dust, poured ash on his head, and cried until his mother heard him from the sea. This was the wound no river could seal, no armor could turn, no prophecy could soften. She warned him of the truth he already knew. Kill Hector, and your own death will follow soon after. Achilles accepted it, truly choosing glory now, not as a dream, but as a cost he could name. Because to Achilles, a life without Patroclus had suddenly become smaller than a short life crowned with vengeance. Thetis went to Hephaestus, divine smith of fire and bronze, and asked for new armor. He forged a shield like a universe, bright with cities, stars, harvests, dances, rivers, and war. When Achilles lifted that armor, he seemed less like a man than a force the world had briefly shaped. He returned to battle like a storm released from a mountain prison, cold and impossible to stop. Still he drove on, chasing Hector around the walls of Troy while the whole city watched. 3 times they circled the city, bronze flashing, feet hammering dust, fate closing with every turn. At last Hector stood and faced him, knowing the chase was over and the hour had come. Hector was no monster. He was Troy's best, a prince fighting for home, wife, child, and city. Achilles killed Hector and claimed the revenge he had crossed the edge of his own life to win. But rage did not leave him afterward. It kept burning even after the victory was his. He bound Hector's body to his chariot and dragged it from the field, dishonoring a fallen enemy. Even the gods recoiled from that grief-fed fury, and Apollo guarded Hector's body from ruin. Then one night, old King Priam, father of Hector and ruler of Troy, entered the Greek camp in secret. He came not as a king, but as a father, asking for his son one last time. Priam knelt before Achilles, kissed the hands that had killed Hector, and begged him to remember his own father. Achilles looked at the old man and saw not Troy, not hatred, but mortality shared by every breathing soul. He wept with Priam, one for a son, the other for a friend and father he missed. Then Achilles returned Hector's body, granting the enemy funeral rites and a brief truce for mourning. And still, the shadow of his own end hung over him like dusk collecting above a ruined city. Homer's Iliad stops before Achilles dies, but later poets carry the story to its final sorrow. After more fighting, more victories, and new enemies cast down before Troy, the destined arrow finally came. Paris, prince of Troy, loosed the shot, and Apollo, god of archery and plague, guided its path. Later tradition says the arrow struck Achilles in the heel, the one place left mortal by Thetis' saving touch. That famous image is probably later than the oldest songs, but it captured a truth people never forget. Even the greatest hero carries one small place where fate can enter and finish what glory started. Achilles fell, and the war kept moving, because war always does, no matter how bright one life burns. The Greeks mourned him as a champion beyond all others, a man built for glory and broken by it. His ashes were said to rest with Patroclus, so that even death would not divide the friends fate had joined. His name outlived Troy, which is why an Achilles' heel still means the hidden weakness inside power. Sometimes that weakness is pride, or anger, or love so deep that loss turns a hero into a storm. Achilles was nearly unstoppable in battle, Yet the thing that truly undid him began long before the fatal arrow. It began the moment glory mattered more to him than safety, and honor mattered more than peace. That is what makes his legend feel alive after 3,000 years. He is mighty, but never simple. And if these old fires keep drawing you closer, there are more legends waiting just beyond this one. More heroes will rise, more gods will bargain, and more monsters will step from the dark of memory. So stay by the fire a little longer, and follow the next legend when it calls. Because somewhere beyond the surf, beyond the bronze, and beyond the smoke of Troy, Achilles is still running. And the world is still listening for the sound of his footsteps beyond the surf.